Hello, I'm Andrew Susskind, and I'm a psychotherapist and author based on the west side of Los Angeles since 1992, specializing in trauma and addictive compulsive behaviors. Welcome to my podcast, named after my recent book and workbook, It's Not About the Sex. Here we have direct and honest conversations related to compulsive sexual behavior and trauma, all from a sexual health perspective. Our intention is to offer fresh viewpoints and practical strategies toward establishing greater intimacy and a more deeply connected life. Let's begin. Hey there, Sue.
Hey, Andrew.
So, some of our listeners know about this, and some of our listeners may be hearing this for the very first time, but this is actually our final episode.
What? No, I knew. Just kidding.
Not a surprise to you. But I can hardly believe it when I say it out loud. I find this so bittersweet. And I'm wondering how you're feeling about it.
Yeah, I don't like when things like this end, but that word bittersweet that's the taste in my mouth right now, It's been amazing and fun, and I've learned so much, and the purpose of it was to follow your books, and that you published 3 books. This podcast covered 2 of those. I've learned so much just with your amazing guests, and just grateful to have the experience, and sad that it's ending.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put into words exactly what it's been like, but I think the most fun has been the relationships, the relationships with our guests, adding this new dimension of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's hard to believe we started this podcast 6 years ago. I was looking back on my calendar, May 7th, 2019. And this is actually our 128th episode. And we've actually had 60 guests.
Oh my goodness.
Which is hard to believe.
That is amazing. So I have some stats for you to go along with those.
Oh, some surprise stats.
Some surprise stats.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if anyone who listens to this only listens to it on Podbean. That's the platform that hosts it. We've had 25,000 downloads.
Whoa.
That's a lot of downloads. And we also put this up on YouTube. And this number, I don't even know how we got to it, but it just seems unreal. And there's analytics and there's statistics, and it's just crazy. But it's 163,800 downloads.
Whoa.
That's crazy. That is just crazy.
It's hard to even understand. I mean, 25,000 downloads is a lot, but 163,000 is,
yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't even compute.
I know. It's amazing. Our top podcast, Podbean episode is the one with Dr. Shane Krause.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And then the last one stat that I have is the highest YouTube was with Joe Court. So, yeah. And there's a lot of comments. If anyone ever wants to go onto YouTube and read the comments, they're quite funny. There's some people who go back and forth with each other on our comments.
Love that. Anything that creates dialogue is good.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So I know you know this, but that this podcast never would have happened if it wasn't for you. You planted the first seed. And my gratitude to you is so deep and so enormous, because at the time I didn't even believe that it was something I could do, really.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the confidence in me that I really did not have in myself. And together we've been on this wild ride all these years.
It's true. And Andrew, you have an amazing voice, right? And you are just the definition of a psychotherapist. You're a great listener, you're a great interviewer. You show up.
Hmm.
I saw that. I
You
just
know,
thought it was perfect.
you saw that in a way that I sometimes have trouble seeing that. I'll tell you a quick story though. In high school and early college, I was a busboy in various restaurants, right? And I was serving um, a table, and the people at the table said, "Have you ever considered broadcasting?"
Mm,
And I said to them, "No, why?" And they said, "Well, you have a broadcasting voice." And I obviously I went in the direction of psychology and social work and all of that. But there was something in the back of my mind that always thought, wow, that would be cool to consider broadcasting and, go in that direction.
yeah.
And I think this podcast was really my chance to play with that and to enjoy that and to own that part of me that these people way back then, I mean, we're talking like the 80s,
Wow.
um, told me I should consider.
Yeah, it's a thing you have. It's like Frasier, right? Remember he had that thank you for calling. I forget what his show was, but
Yeah.
yeah. There's
Kelsey Grammer and I
Kelsey Grammer.
are buds. Yeah.
But it's amazing. I like the whole platform of telling stories and
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
radio. To me, it's like old timey, podcasting. Everyone kind of has a podcast, and people get make fun of that. But what you brought to the audience is just so valuable, and people can listen to this forever. Our voices will go on to infinity, So it's
And
just amazing
beyond.
and beyond.
I'm glad for that because I am proud of what we've created. And this is such, I want to call it a niche category that when we're talking about problematic sexual behavior, when we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about brokenheartedness, it's not your average podcast. It's not your average topic in general.
Right, right.
And, because I want to focus on gratitude today, I feel so grateful for so many people. I mean, actually, too many to name. It would be take us too long. But of course, I want to thank all of our guests. I mean, they take their time and energy and
Yeah.
expertise to participate in these really honest and meaningful conversations. And some of our guests were local here in Southern California, some were national, even international. And the wisdom, the passion, the generosity that they shared with us was just so priceless.
And it's like at the beginning, we were traveling, we were on the road. I would take my podcast equipment and we'd go to people's offices and we'd set
Right.
up, and, the quality wasn't always the best, and we just fumbling. And then I got better equipment, and we just evolved with all of this. And then COVID didn't stop us.
No.
We were able to figure it out, and having this platform available for us was amazing. So yeah, there was a lot of changes and growth, and your guests were just, I think, I don't think anyone ever turned you down. I think everyone was very eager to come and speak.
Well, my guess, thank you for mentioning that because my hunch about that is that my colleagues want to talk about this. They want a broader conversation. And so I hope the podcast provided that home for that kind of expansive and deeper conversation than we can have in a few minutes with a client
Mm-hmm.
or even with a colleague, that we can have these longer opportunities to really talk at length. And speaking of talking at length, I want to mention our listeners. And this is always
Mm.
an interesting piece because we don't actually get to meet our listeners. I feel like we know them in some ways, but we don't, right? But what we can guess is that there's some colleagues who tune in. There's some some folks in 12-step recovery who tune in. There's curious people who want to learn about themselves who tune in, but they're kind of like a silent community. And I have always wondered if we could have a dialogue with our listeners,
Mm,
what they would say. And I never established that kind of interactive opportunity so much, but I just trust that our messages that we've shared, that our guests have shared, have reached those who have been able to receive them and hopefully receive some healing from them.
absolutely. And I think twice I was surprised by people who recognized me as being on the podcast, and I got called out like, "Hey, I think I know you from Andrew's podcast." And it's just nice because you just don't know that,
No,
who is listening. And I know I have friends and family that listen. And of course, I have a family member who works on the show, right? And he gets a lot out of it as well. But yeah, it is the silent community. It's an
hmm,
interesting, and we're that to other podcasts that we listen to, right? The host
sure,
doesn't know who we are, and we're benefiting from that. So it's
for
pretty cool.
sure.
Yeah.
I have been contacted by a handful of people through the years, and it's always so gratifying to hear how our podcast touches them, and how it's really been part of their
Yeah.
learning and growing and stretching and deepening. And that's the good news. The other side of the coin is that there are those who are still suffering and struggling with compulsive sexual behavior.
Yeah.
And of
Sure.
course, I hope that a little something may have softened the suffering for them and taken them a step further toward maybe some self-compassion, possibly asking for some help, and really starting some kind of healing path. That's
Mm.
my deepest desire.
Yeah. And I think just by them making the choice to listen to the podcast is taking the step in that direction.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
One thing I love at the end of every podcast, you always ask your guests if there's a takeaway or two for our listeners. And what do you think would be portable for our listeners to take with them?
This is such a tough question because there's so many things, but I'm going to try and highlight just a few possibilities. Hopefully, be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself, stay curious and non judgmental of yourself and others, have fun, have play, have ease, explore pleasure, allow for love to be given and received, and know that your sexual health is your birthright. And hopefully, with the help of trusted others, you get to explore what that really means to you.
Wow, that was beautifully said. So, you have something you like to share, which is in your book and your workbook. So, I guess it makes sense to end with that.
No, I'm getting verklempt here. This was something that was shared with me many years ago, and I included it in my book and at the very end of my workbook because I think it's so important to keep in mind. And it goes like this: if you're driving across the country from New York to Los Angeles and you get a flat tire in Des Moines, it doesn't mean you have to go back to New York. Fix the tire and keep going, no matter how many repairs you need to make along the way.